Hello, everyone.
Okay.
Welcome to another episode of Bro Doc Talk. This episode's going to be a little bit different because we are in transition. I first want to take this opportunity to thank Henry Lewis for being my collaborator for the last few years in this project. He is taking a little bit of time off and moving in a different direction, but I am happy to have one of my friends and excellent colleague join me on Bro Dog Talk. You may remember him from a previous episode. This is Dr. Ian Molyneaux, and I'll have him reintroduce himself to y'all.
Hi. I guess the last time I was here, I was in a different role in my place, but I am currently staff anesthesiologist and a critical care doctor in Memphis, Tennessee, and I also work for the medical school here. And I've been friends with Dr. Young for quite a while. I think the pandemic kind of forced us all to kind of find new avenues to learn and learn to interact with other people, especially in a virtual sort of zone. And we ended up bonding over a lot of shared experiences that we go through in medicine. And I'm happy to talk about whatever it is that will help other people to navigate the world of medicine in America that we're in.
Thanks for that, Dr. Molyneux. I'm very excited to have you here. I'm sure our listeners are going to be very excited to get some perspectives from you and have a new, fresh energy into what we're doing for our Black and Brown students, residents, fellows, and attendings in medicine. Today, we wanted to talk about something that we haven't really discussed and something that's not really discussed in coursework or in residency training, and that's something called the hidden curriculum.
Hmm.
So, Dr. Molyneux, you are intimately involved with trainees and medical students. What is your definition of the hidden curriculum?
Uh, I would say that the definition of the oh boy, that's a very, very difficult question to answer in just one like take. But I always remember if anybody who was a fan of Scandal with Kerry Washington. And one of the things that was always said in that movie, I'm not movie, that show, it always stuck out to me was that you always have to work twice as hard for half of the recognition.
Mhm.
And like some people think that is just an exaggeration, but it is something that I do think is very much something that happens to underrepresented minorities in medicine. When you're training, is that you do really have to um, excellence is the only way for you to be adequately considered. I used to always say that like mediocre people who are not underrepresented minorities seem to skate by, but the rest of us have to make sure that everything is on point, on track, and well to make sure that you kind of get the recognition that you deserve. It's not fair. Um, we know this, but it's something that I tell every single trainee of color who I interact with. I'm like, it's not fair, but this is the reality.
Mhm.
Okay, if you're gonna make it through the system, you cannot be like the other people. It's not gonna work for you if you don't put this into your pipe and smoke it very early. You will suffer the consequences of not taking that advice.
So I was a first
Um,
generation medical student. And a first generation graduate student, first generation in my family to go to college. And so I personally never got this lesson from any of my um, family members or anyone growing up. So I personally had to navigate the waters of this, and that gets a little bit treacherous because, like you said, you have to be twice as good to get half as much of what your white counterparts are going to get. So,
mhm.
I guess, when did you learn this?
When did I learn this? So I grew up in Jamaica. So it was kind of funny when I moved to the United States the first time because I didn't because we have such a diverse ethnic background in my country, like or my home country, like our motto is out of many one people. And the concept is that like we have so many different people that are there that it's very hard for people to make race construct in a very real way. And so it was something that was actually completely foreign to me when I moved here. I'd always heard about it, I'd seen it on TV. And, like when you see things on TV, sometimes you think, it's just like an over exaggeration, or you think to yourself, hey, this is just for, dramatic effect or whatever. But when you start to experience it for yourself, in fact, I will tell you that you don't even recognize it. Like I didn't recognize it a lot of the time sometimes when it happened to me. I just thought that I wasn't trying hard enough, or I wasn't trying good. I was not putting my best forward, and I would just try harder.
Hmm.
Then when you start to see your colleagues do things and you're like, wait, I just got reamed out for that, or I just got cussed out for that. Like, no, everybody's just giving you a pass. Like, whoa, 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 whoa,
Hmm.
whoa. And then you start to say to yourself, okay, this is not the same outlook. And then you start to say, well, what is different about me that is not the same?
Right.
That when I compare myself to somebody else, what is different about me? And then you start to realize, like, oh, I get it. So, and then you realize, like, I remember one distinct thing that happened to me when I was in residency in particular. Like, I was on an ICU rotation, and I realized that I was the only person of color on the entire team. All the nurses, all the physicians, everyone else was white,
Hmm.
right? And I was the only person of color in that entire thing. And at first, you don't really recognize what's happening until the patients start responding to you a little bit differently. And then you realize, because I hate to say, but a lot of our patients who end up in hospitals that are in training institutions, a very large portion of them end up being Black and brown people. And that's something I've noticed in every single institution I've worked in as a training person, was that, hey, why we're not that much of the population, but we make up so much of the training institutions.
Hmm.
And then you realize that it's a socioeconomic issue that happens, and these are the places where they can actually get care. And so
Hmm.
they have to go where they are. And then you start realizing that patients respond to you a little bit differently, and you're like, huh. And then I said to one of my colleagues, I said, it's just interesting that I'm the only person of color here. And then his response was, why do you always make things about race? And then I was just like, oh my gosh, it
That's
is.
it.
I mean, why is this making you uncomfortable? It is the reality.
Hmm.
It is the reality. And so you want to pretend that it's not about race. Race has something to do with things, my friend. I said, just look at the numbers. If you have an illness and you're a person of color, you are sometimes 7 more times likely to die than your white counterparts.
Hmm.
That is the statistic. That's not me making things up. That's what it is. And I tell people all the time, I said, if you're a fan of tennis and you remember Serena Williams, who used to complain when she had her pregnancy that she was having shortness of breath, no one believed her until she had a pulmonary embolism. Then it's
Hmm.
like, oh, and then you think to yourself, a woman who is as famous as that,
Who has
has
the
influence,
Mhm.
has money, has all of that, and is still struggling to get people to believe her symptoms as a person of color. Like, what does that mean for a patient? What does it mean for us? What does it mean for people who have to? And then it starts to click very, very quickly.
Mhm. Mhm.
Like, oh, it is not the same. Like, as we say back home in my home country, a mule knows that the world is not a level place. Like, it's definitely something that you have to navigate, and that dogs and cats don't have the same luck in life.
Mhm.
And the minute that you start acknowledging these things, it starts to make it. I thought it made my life a little bit easier, to be honest, because if you say, hey, these are the rules that the game that you're playing with, then at least you know how to play.
Mhm.
I think what happens to a lot of students that I've seen, and residents and trainees, is that some of them don't recognize it, and
Mhm.
then they end up in problems.
So the very
And
fact, yeah, so the very fact that the hidden curriculum actually exists argues that there is inequity in
Mhm.
education, right? And so, I'm in a state, you are in a state that where DEI is under assault 24/7.
Not
And
under assault. It's gone. So we used to have a Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. It has been completely disillusioned because the place that I work is a state university, and it's now completely gone.
So
So
I would challenge you, and I would challenge our listeners. I would say when those things happen, I would argue that DEI is not gone because my very existence in medicine is an affront to the system because I am a barrier to, I'm breaking down that barrier. And I'm really happy to be in the position that my trainees of color can see that I am there for them. I am in a position of authority and I can actually have affect meaningful change. Excuse me. But you know, when we are fighting institutions, when we're fighting systems that are undermining the very essence of what it means to practice medicine, aka justice and equity, then that just argues that we need systems that include DEI. We need educational programming that includes DEI. Um,
yeah.
and I'm totally with you. And so when we have these situations, and I'm sure you've gotten these evaluations about being unprofessional, what is your definition of professionalism when it comes to trainees or attendings or residents of color?
I find that when it comes to quote unquote unprofessionalism, it could be one thing I've warned some of them. I'm just like, if you see a colleague do or say something and you're like, oh, this is acceptable, I'm like, it may not be acceptable for you to do that.
Mhm.
And because you may be labeled as unprofessional or whatever. And, if you say, hey, well, so and so does this, that's just hearsay. They are going to use what they have seen. And so you have to warn them, like, you have to be careful. Like, that is not, if it's not quote unquote acceptable behavior, then you have to be very, very careful. Another thing that I try to warn trainees of color is that everyone gets frustrated in medicine. You can't, if anyone says it's always easy days and kumbayas and
I would love that job.
yeah, but it's that is not the reality of where, and so things will frustrate you. You know,
Mhm.
um, People will do things that will probably get under your skin for a little bit, and normal human reactions are okay to have, but you have to temper it, unfortunately, or else you will be seen as unprofessional. I mean, I've had colleagues of color who have been told that they were rude and raising their voice at people, and you have to kind of step in and like, no, they just spoke in a firm tone that something was important for some patient care, and that there was a lot of pushback towards it, and that they said this needs to happen now. This is important for this patient to do well. I need you to stop finding ways of not trying to carry out this thing because it's something that you don't want to do. And then it turns out that it's not about, in fact, when you look at it, you could be like, hey, you were being unprofessional, actually endangering the patient by not doing something that was appropriate for them. But instead it turns around to the attitude that you get, that
And
you
this
were
is,
given. Sorry.
yeah, and
And I,
to exhaustion and burnout and people leaving
yeah.
because you can't just practice medicine. You can't just do your job. You have to actually police yourself and your behavior in order to protect your employment, in order to protect your training opportunities, and so on and so forth.
Oh
Um,
yeah. Oh
and
yeah.
that's unacceptable.
Oh yeah, I'm a totally different person from when I started training. I've learned to, like, literally I've learned, like, if I get upset or frustrated about something, I literally have to tell myself, calm down, count to 10, because if you say what you want to say right now, it's going to be construed as rude or unprofessional or whatever. So you have to calm down, and you just have to and then you have to say something in a very, very level tone, saying, um, I'll give you an instance. I'll be like, I understand that this patient's blood cultures have not been taken, but this patient is septic. We need to give antibiotics now. I understand that that was the order. I'm giving you a verbal order now to proceed with this. I will change it, but this is very urgent.
Mhm.
Please do what I ask. And it, instead of saying, is normally the reaction would be, I I literally have just explained this to you twice and it's still not happening. What is going on? And you could lose your cool, but you have to temper yourself because it's going to stop being about, hey, you were endangering the patient, and now it becomes about how you were aggressive and unprofessional. And, especially one thing that I noted right away when I was in medicine was just like, weaponization of feeling of victimhood and tears and that sort of thing. And you realize like, okay, well, I don't want somebody to, because I'm trying to do the right thing and I am trying to do it in the way that I would want somebody to do it for me, then to turn around and then it ruined my career. In
Yeah.
fact, one of the things I've learned, me personally, is if I can do something myself, then I will do it because then I don't have to worry about and this is the difference in, at least for me in anesthesiology, is that and critical care medicine, is that sometimes a lot of things, if it's not happening fast enough, I can just expedite and do it myself. And then it saves me the frustration. But really and truly, that should not be happening.
Yeah.
And it's
You know,
just the
I
reality of it.
Yeah, and I practice perinatology, right? So lots of things are like moving extremely fast, and we're having
Oh,
very,
yeah.
very difficult conversations on a daily basis. And I'm just thinking of something recently that just happened to me, whereas I'm have a huge panel of people that I have to tell devastating news to. I need
Mhm.
people placed into the electronic medical record system. I need orders to be conducted. No one's doing anything. And then I complained to someone that was in charge of the office, and I was told that maybe if I said thank you more and brought donuts to the office, that people would actually do work for me. And I said, therein lies the issue. Would you say that to someone that didn't look like me or didn't hold true to my authentic self, right? I am the type of, and I hear you when you talk about, taking a breath, stepping back. I totally get it. But that only works for me so much that I need to really be true to I am because I don't want to betray exactly how I feel, what I feel is going on in a situation. And I feel that I can do that because I'm in a position of being an attending. Could I do that as a medical student or a resident? Absolutely not, due to the power differential. But I think I can quote unquote take advantage of being in a position of authority and standing up for myself and recognizing that you telling me to essentially bring food and say yes sir, no sir is going to make my life easier. To me
It
as a
sounds like some
that the math is not mathing on that.
it sounds like some plantation life.
Yeah. So, that is not,
Hey,
yeah. And I don't
you
even
know,
like that.
I was like, yes, massa. Would you like another donut, sir?
So,
I mean, like, what is that?
when
I
I
mean,
have when I
all of
hear
somebody to even say that to you, it's just crazy.
Yeah, yeah. So when I have trainees that I talk to and I say, I've gotten these evaluations and they say that, you're argumentative and aggressive, I'm very careful when I communicate that type of information to trainees of color
Hmm.
because it's always coded language and it's only
Hmm.
going to hurt that trainee, particularly when there is no actual meat to any allegations. Because when you ask someone like, well, how is so and so aggressive or how were they unprofessional? Well, no, I actually don't know. Spell it out to me. What actually happened? And then you say, do you think that could be construed as a biased event by you? Well, I'm not a racist. No one ever accused you of being a racist, but you just told on yourself, right? So
Hmm.
you have to be very,
I,
very cognizant when you're dealing with um, the word professionalism when it comes to people of color in medicine because the system was not set up for us to succeed. And like I said
oh
earlier,
no,
very presence is lighting the system on fire.
oh no, it's not set up to succeed. You don't have a lot of role models to look up to, and when and then there are a lot of barriers too. you
Mhm.
know. So it very much is it is it's very easy to see trainees of color get discouraged. It's
Mhm.
very, I mean, for them to get discouraged, it's very, very easy. But one of the things that you can I find rewarding is that just as you said, just by existing and giving them a beacon, like, hey, if I'm here, and especially like we have a Black physicians meetup here in Memphis regularly. We try to get the trainees to come and join. In fact, like every July, there is a Black trainee meetup at one of the attendings houses. We rotate, and like all the trainees of color are invited. It's a huge event. I mean, like it's catered and whatever, and we all chip in money because we all understand like what it is. And I remember I went last year, there were probably, I don't know, like 75 people there. It's it's a very, very it's a very proud thing to see. And I think those things are important because they start the academic year, they start their residency or internship or whatever, knowing that one, I'm not alone, two, there are people out there who will care and who will advocate,
Yeah.
because they know that um there there is light at the end of the tunnel. And one of the things that they know to do, if they if they feel comfortable, is to call you and talk to you about things. Because it's one of the things that I know is that because of that so-called power differential, they may not feel like they can call you and talk to you
Mhm.
or whatever. But I try to let them know, hey, I don't care what it is, like give me a call. Now, to say that some of our colleagues are not unprofessional and they're not, I mean, it does happen on occasion, like, no, nothing is perfect. So, but at the end of the day, the coded language and the coded thing does exist.
Mhm.
And, people need to realize that it does exist and that we're not making it up.
Right. Right. And I think, how can we improve illumination of the hidden curriculum in medical education is by having these things, having these like
Mhm,
conversations with our trainees, establishing mentor-mentee relationships, having open lines
mhm,
of
mhm,
um,
mhm,
and also just calling it out in our front of our colleagues, like when you have your clinical competency committee meetings or your program evaluation committee meetings, where we talk about trainees of color potentially in a different light as compared to their white colleagues. Um, and I think, reinforcing with faculty that, you know, this is not okay, or trainees of color actually
But
need more support in order to succeed, aka equity in the system, so that everyone can be on the same playing field.
the problem is that not all training programs even have faculty who are of color. I've
Right.
seen that in some, like if you are safe, I mean, like there was just an article in Medscape that came out, I don't know how many months ago or maybe over a year ago, that was basically saying ortho so white. That was literally the title.
Yep.
And so I can tell you, like in all, I don't know, actually I don't know. There are no orthopedic surgeons of color here in my city. Zero.
Wow.
Zero. They're all white men and probably a couple women, and that's it.
Mhm.
I think they've had their first Black resident in this program for, I mean, a very, very long time. You may be the first one ever. It is, and so it's just like, while I would love to be like, hey, somebody needs to speak up for these guys or whatever. I mean, somebody needs to even be in the room to even have that conversation.
Exactly. Exactly.
Uh, You, and then so where do you go from here? Because and that's something that I always find very challenging when these things come up, because I'm just like, I, especially if it's somebody who's not in my program or not in my area, it's very difficult for me to be like, I would love to help you. I just don't know because I'm not even in the sphere. I
Mhm.
can only give you advice, but I can't advocate for you at a CCC, for instance. Like I can only give you advice as to how to deal with things.
But I think having that springboard, or having not springboard, having that sounding board is so crucial. And for you, you could talk with the program director and say, "Hey, I I kind of can relate to what this individual is going through. Here's how my perspective objectively on these evaluations. and the experience that this person's having in this program. And I think that can actually be really impactful and meaningful. So I wouldn't discount the fact that your specialties are different. I think that's actually a really good thing.
Okay. Well, I mean, I know for us as faculty, like the one things that we have to do is to continue to make sure that, we're seen, we make sure that our voices are heard and that we're speaking up for ourselves and for them. And I think one of the things that's very important is by also speaking up for yourself, like you make them realize like, hey, like these people are here to stay, they're not going anywhere, and they will challenge my nonsense.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Any,
So yeah.
any final words of wisdom for our listeners?
Um, just for what I said that you have to know if you go into a game knowing the rules, at least you know how to play, right? So it's not to discourage people and say, hey, it's gonna be completely racist and people are gonna call you the N word. But you have to understand that it is not a level playing field, okay? And the minute you understand that, you have to be so once you understand it's a level playing field, that when people say things like you are not professional or you're not this or you're not that, you understand that a lot of that may not be you. I mean, medicine is tough, residency is really tough,
Mhm.
but some of it may be when you get these evaluations of you're not doing this or you're not doing something else or you need to do this. Sometimes it's just their perception of you because your colleagues are also on that same level, or you may be even better than your colleagues and not realize it. And
Mhm.
so you just need to, if they give you an eval and it's not something that you want to, you ask like, can you give me examples and can you give me real ways on how to improve?
Mhm.
And you ask for objective data, and not only that, I said, what would you do if you were struggling with this, right? Because you may be struggling with something for real. You may be struggling for some, and the only way to get better is to ask. And if you are in a position where you can't get the help that you need, then that's a problem. Like at the end of the day, when we train our residents, medical students, fellows, whatever it is, the job is not to get you fired and kick you out. The job is to make you a competent physician that you can go out and take care of people and be an example to others. And so ask for the help that you have and then keep persisting.
Mhm.
So if you don't get it from your chief resident or your chief fellow, you go to your APD or your PD and your chair or your associate vice chair, your GME, and just keep going until you get the help that you need. Don't go out without a fight. And if it is that you have because it's frustrating in medicine, I'm not gonna say no. Learn to find ways to decompress
Mhm.
and lean on the people that are there and just keep showing up and keep doing your best. And that's it.
I can't sum it up better. That's awesome. Well,
All right.
great first episode with Dr. Molyneaux. I hope that you guys tune in for future episodes. It's going to be a great ride and have a
All
wonderful day.
right.